There's a moment. Maybe it already happened to you, or maybe it's still waiting somewhere down the road, but you know the one I mean. You're sitting in your living room, the TV's off, the house is quiet, and out of nowhere a thought lands on your chest like a weight. This is my life now. This is what's left. If you clicked on this video because that thought has visited you more than once lately, I want you to hear something clearly before we go any further. You are not broken. You are not too late. And what you're about to learn in the next few minutes is not a trick, not a gimmick, not some watered-down self-help slogan you've already heard 100 times. It's a real answer. One that survived 2,000 years of wars, plagues, exile, and heartbreak, because it actually works. By the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why so many people spend their 60s, 70s, and 80s either quietly restless or quietly at peace, and which side of that line you get to choose. There's a reason this philosophy is having a comeback right now, in America, in living rooms just like yours. It's called Stoicism, and it wasn't written by monks in a cave somewhere, disconnected from real life. It was written by an emperor who buried his own children while running one of the largest empires the world has ever seen. It was written by a man born into slavery who became one of the greatest teachers of freedom in human history. These weren't theories dreamed up by comfortable men. They were survival manuals written by people who had lost almost everything and still found a way to stand up straight. Here's the part nobody tells you about growing older, the part that no commercial, no birthday card, no well-meaning relative will ever say out loud. The culture around you has been quietly training you for decades to believe that aging is loss of energy, loss of relevance, loss of usefulness. And once that belief settles in, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It starts running your whole life without you even noticing. You stop starting new things. You apologize for taking up space at the dinner table like your opinion expired the day you retired. You get smaller, not because your body forced you to, but because a story got inside your head and you never once questioned it. The Stoics would have looked at that and shaken their heads, honestly, a little baffled by us. Not because aging isn't real. Marcus Aurelius knew his body would fail him. Seneca knew his friends would die before him. They weren't naive, but they built their entire way of living around one idea that still sounds almost rebellious today. Your worth was never in your body. It was never in your job title, your paycheck, or how fast you can keep up with a room full of 30-year-olds. It lives somewhere your birth certificate can't touch. Epictetus limped through the rest of his life after an injury from his years as a slave. And he used to tell his students something that should stop you in your tracks. Your body, he said, was never fully yours to begin with. It was on loan the whole time. It was always going to change. What's actually yours, what nobody and nothing can ever take from you, is your ability to choose how you respond to what happens to you. And that ability doesn't weaken with age. If you actually use it, it gets sharper. So here's the first shift, and I want you to really sit with this one before we move forward. Growing older isn't subtraction. It's a transfer. All that power you used to pour into your appearance, your title, your ability to outwork everyone in the room, that power doesn't just disappear when you turn 65. It comes back to you. And it becomes available for something the Stoics considered far more valuable. Your character, your judgment, your ability to stay steady while everyone else is falling apart around you. That's not a smaller life. Men who studied happiness harder than almost anyone in history believed that was the beginning of the only life actually worth living. Now I want to ask you something, and I mean this honestly. How old are you right now, reading this? Drop it in the comments, along with 1 year you secretly hope people remember as the year things turned around for you. I read these, every single one, and you'd be surprised how many people just like you are sitting exactly where you're sitting, quietly trying to rebuild what a good life looks like from the inside out. Let's talk about time, because nothing rattles a person in their 60s quite like the sound of a clock they suddenly can't ignore anymore. Seneca wrote an entire essay about this, called On the Shortness of Life. And the opening line still lands like a punch 2,000 years later. Most people, he said, complain that life is too short. But then he turns the knife. It's not that we have too little time, it's that we waste so much of it. Life is long enough, he argued, if you actually know how to spend it. Sit with that for a second, because it flips the entire fear so many people carry into their later years. The fear that there simply isn't enough time left to matter. Seneca isn't handing you false comfort here, he's handing you something sharper and more useful. The distracted version of a life can waste decades without even feeling them pass. But a present, deliberate version of a life can find more meaning in a single year than most people find in 80. Picture two people, both turning 65 on the same exact day. Same health, same bank account, same number of years left on the clock. The first spends their mornings scrolling through news that upsets them, replaying old arguments, resenting people for things that happened decades ago, already convinced the rest of their life will be quiet and small. The second wakes up and actually looks at the person across the breakfast table, notices the light coming through the window, treats an ordinary Tuesday like it will never come around in quite the same way again, because it won't. Same years left. Completely different life. That's not a coincidence. And it's not luck. It's a decision, one you're allowed to start making today. And in the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how the Stoics turned that decision into a repeatable practice. One that's been quietly changing how people spend their remaining years for over 2,000 years. I want to tell you about a man named Cato, because ideas are always easier to carry when they have a face attached to them. By the time Cato reached his final years, the Rome he loved had almost completely slipped away from him. He'd spent his whole life fighting to protect a republic that was steadily falling into the hands of men chasing personal power, first Pompey, then eventually Julius Caesar himself, a man Cato believed would destroy everything Rome was supposed to stand for. Cato wasn't young anymore. He didn't have unlimited energy, and he didn't have an army behind him. What he had was a mind that refused to bend, no matter how much the world around him pressed down on it. When Caesar's forces finally cornered the last resistance in North Africa, Cato found himself surrounded, outnumbered, with only one real way out: surrender and live out the rest of his life at the mercy of a man he considered corrosive to everything good. His friends begged him to take the deal. Surely, they said, an old man deserves a quiet retirement. There's no shame in staying alive. But Cato understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. There's a difference between staying alive and staying yourself. On his final night, he sat down and read Plato's writing on the immortality of the soul, calmly, almost like a craftsman checking his tools before one last job. And when the moment came, he chose to remain exactly who he'd always been, rather than shrink into a smaller, safer version of himself on someone else's terms. Now, I'm not telling you this so you think growing older means some dramatic final stand. Almost none of us will ever face a moment like Cato's, and honestly, thank goodness for that. I'm telling you this because of what it reveals. The later years of a life were never meant to be the place where you soften your standards or quietly accept whatever version of yourself circumstances hand you. They're the proving ground for everything you spent your earlier decades quietly practicing, and that applies just as much to a 70-year-old finally setting a boundary with a difficult adult child as it does to a Roman statesman facing an army. If you've ever had a moment, at any age, where you finally said the thing you'd swallowed for years, where you stopped shrinking just to keep the peace, I want to hear about it. Put it in the comments. These stories matter more than you'd think, both to me and to everyone else reading this who needs a reminder that it's never too late to become that person too. All right, let's get practical, because you deserve more than stories by now. You deserve something you can actually use starting today. Epictetus built his entire teaching around one distinction, so simple it almost sounds too obvious, and yet almost nobody actually lives by it. Some things, he said, are up to us, our judgments, our choices, our reactions, and some things are not up to us. Our bodies, our health, what other people think of us, how events turn out. Nearly all human suffering, he argued, comes from mixing these two categories up, treating things that were never in our control as though they were. Apply that directly to where you are right now, because this is exactly where that idea stops being philosophy and starts being survival. Your knees aren't up to you the way they used to be. Neither is your hearing or how fast you bounce back after a long day. That's biology, not a reflection of your effort or your character. If you build your happiness on the expectation that your body should behave the way it did at 35, you've guaranteed yourself years of quiet grief chasing something that was never fully yours to control in the first place, at any age. But here's the part people miss, because they're too busy mourning the first half of that idea. What remains completely, entirely yours at 60, at 75, at 90, is how you interpret what's happening to you. Whether you meet a hard diagnosis with dignity or despair, whether a slower morning fills you with gratitude that you still got one, or resentment for the morning you used to have. I think about a woman in her early 70s who'd spent her whole adult life hiking. A hip injury took the mountain trails away from her, the ones she'd walked for decades. By any normal measure, that's a real loss, and she felt it as one, deeply, for a long while, and Stoicism never once asked her to skip that grief or fake her way past it. This philosophy was never about pretending things don't hurt. It was about not stacking a second layer of suffering on top of the first by demanding the world be something it isn't. What she discovered months later was that the mountains were never actually the source of her joy. The real source had been attention, noticing the light on the leaves, the rhythm of her own breathing, the quiet company of her own thoughts. And it turned out all of that was still fully available on a flat garden path 15 minutes from her front door. Nothing about her circumstances changed for the better. What changed was where she placed her judgment, and that one shift gave her joy back, almost completely intact. Tonight, I want you to actually try something, not just nod along and forget it by tomorrow morning. Grab a piece of paper or open a note on your phone and draw a line straight down the middle. On one side, write down everything about getting older that genuinely scares you or frustrates you right now. On the other side, next to each one, write down the one thing that stays entirely up to you in how you respond to it. Not a fix, just your judgment, your choice of attitude toward it. This is the exact exercise the Stoics leaned on for 2,000 years, And it's one of the fastest ways I know to feel your footing come back under you. If this is already landing somewhere in your chest, hit that like button before you keep reading. It genuinely helps this reach someone else out there right now who needs to hear it just as badly as you did a few minutes ago. Because what comes next changes everything about how you see the years you have left, and it involves the one subject almost nobody your age wants to talk about directly. Every culture on Earth has taught us to look away from this subject, especially once it stops feeling abstract. Death, and the Stoics did something that sounds almost strange until you understand what they were actually doing with it. They practiced what they called Memento Mori. Remember that you will die, not as some morbid obsession, but as one of the most effective tools they had for actually living. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself over and over in his own private journal that he could leave this life at any moment, and he let that fact shape how he spoke, how he acted, how he treated the people standing in front of him. Seneca told his friend Lucilius to count each day like a small, complete life of its own, not because death deserved more fear, but because an honest relationship with it strips away all the small, petty distractions that quietly eat up most of a human life. Here's why this matters more for you right now than it ever could for someone in their 20s. At 25, death feels theoretical, distant, almost fictional. By the time you've reached your 60s or 70s, it's already stopped being theoretical. You've likely lost people already. Your own body has reminded you, more than once, that the clock is real. And that puts you in a position younger people simply don't have access to. You can't hide behind denial anymore. The only real question left is whether you face that truth with dread, or with the strange, hard-won clarity the Stoics insisted was waiting on the other side of it. Because here's what they discovered, and what modern research on end-of-life reflection keeps confirming. People who build an honest, unafraid relationship with their own mortality don't fall into despair over it. They become remarkably present. They stop postponing the phone call. They stop swallowing the apology they've owed someone for years. They stop waiting for some better moment to say the important thing, because the whole point of Memento Mori is that a better moment might never come, and that recognition is exactly what makes today feel vivid instead of forgettable. Seneca lived this out at the very end. Condemned to death by an emperor who'd once been his own student, he didn't spend his final hours in panic. He spent them comforting the people around him, speaking his last thoughts clearly, meeting the moment with the same steadiness he'd spent his whole life teaching. That wasn't a performance for the history books. It was simply what decades of practice looks like when the real test finally arrives. I want to leave you with a gentler version of this, because most of us will never face anything close to what Seneca faced. Once a week, take 5 quiet minutes and genuinely ask yourself, what if this were my final year? Not to spiral into fear, but to get clear. What would I stop tolerating? What would I finally say, and to who? What tiny daily irritation would suddenly reveal itself as embarrassingly small? People who actually practice this consistently report the same thing. The fear of death, faced directly and in small doses, shrinks. It's the fear that gets avoided and shoved into a corner that grows quietly out of control. This, I think, is the real secret hiding inside this entire philosophy for anyone in the second half of life. The years ahead of you aren't worth less because there are fewer of them left. They're worth more, precisely because their number is finally visible in a way it never was when you were young. Scarcity, faced honestly, is what gives anything its true weight. So let's close with something you can actually carry with you starting tomorrow morning. Every night, ask yourself 3 honest questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short of the person I actually want to be? What will I do differently tomorrow? This isn't about punishing yourself. Treat it the way an athlete studies old footage, not the way a judge hands down a sentence. Do this consistently, and over months, you build something a lot of people your age quietly lack. Genuine self-knowledge. The kind that makes you feel solid in your own skin again. And look for one small chance, every single day, to practice a little courage, a little honesty, a little self-control. It doesn't need to be dramatic. Courage might just mean finally telling your adult child how you actually feel. Wisdom might mean pausing before reacting to something that would have set you off 5 years ago. These aren't small things. According to the people who built this entire way of living, these ordinary daily choices are the whole substance of a life well lived. There's no separate grander stage where the real living happens. This right here in your 60s, your 70s, your ordinary Tuesday afternoon is the stage. So let's go back to where we started. That quiet moment when the world goes silent and a question rises up uninvited. Is this it? I hope by now that question feels less like a threat and more like exactly what it was always meant to be. An invitation. You're not approaching a decline. You're stepping into the exact chapter this entire way of thinking was built for. Your body will keep changing. And that was never up to you at any age. But your character, your attention, your ability to love the life you actually have instead of grieving the one you imagined, that stays completely yours for as long as you're here to use it. If any part of this gave you even a little bit of that steadiness back, do me a favor. Hit like on this video, share it with someone in your life who's been a little quieter lately. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Stoic Origin. We're building something here for people who are done chasing noise and ready to actually live these years well. I'll see you in the next one.